I hosted Christmas dinner, and my whole family ghosted me. No call, no text. A week later, Dad messaged, "Your brother's wedding is $3,000 a guest. Pay up." I sent $1 with a note that said, "Enjoy." Then I shut down every family account in my name. 3 days later, Mom was screaming on my front lawn. There comes a moment in everyone's life when you realize who your real family truly is. For me, that moment wasn't some warm, fuzzy revelation. It was a cold, hard smack to the face when I discovered my own parents had not only forged my signature and drained my bank account, but then had the audacity to demand I thank them for it. I was 32, and for as long as I could remember, I'd been the responsible one. The organizer. The glue. The one who made sure birthdays weren't forgotten, that holidays were planned, always trying to hold everyone together. It's almost embarrassing how much effort I poured into making Christmas perfect every single year. But this year, I really went all out. It was the first time I was hosting Christmas dinner at my own house, and I was determined to make it special. I spent weeks planning the menu, cleaning until my house gleamed, decorating every nook and cranny, even buying everyone personalized little gifts to put on their plates. It wasn't cheap, but I didn't care. I just wanted to do something that would finally make me feel like a cherished part of the family again after what had been a pretty rough year. But then Christmas came and went. My house stayed empty. Not one call. Not one text. Not even a lazy group chat emoji saying, "Sorry, we can't make it." Nothing. I remember standing in my kitchen that night, still wearing my nice shirt, staring at the perfectly roasted turkey that no one was ever going to eat. The house smelled incredible, garlic, butter, rosemary, but it was quiet. Way too quiet. A lump formed in my throat, hot and heavy, and I poured myself a glass of wine, trying desperately not to cry. I didn't even know if I was angry or just deeply, profoundly hurt. Probably both. The silence continued for days. Then I saw it. My parents had posted on Facebook about how wonderful their Christmas was with the whole family. And by whole family, they meant my brother Mark and his fiancée. I scrolled through their photos, my fingers trembling, seeing them all smiling around a table at his house. Matching pajamas, matching mugs, matching smiles. It was like a physical blow, a visceral punch to the gut that left me breathless. A week later, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my dad. For one foolish second, I thought maybe, just maybe, he was reaching out to apologize or at least explain. But nope. The message just said, "Your brother's wedding is $3,000 per guest. Pay up." I actually laughed out loud. It was a hollow, disbelieving sound. I stared at my phone, waiting for the "just kidding" follow-up that never came. $3,000? To attend a wedding I hadn't even been invited to in person? Mark hadn't even called me. He just sent word through our dad like I was some distant cousin they barely knew. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I sent $1 with a note that simply said, "Enjoy." It wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. I wasn't going to bankroll the same people who couldn't even bother to show up at my table for one night out of the year. As I sat there, fuming, another realization hit me like a ton of bricks. How much of my life was tied to my family's convenience? The streaming accounts, the gym membership, the Costco card, all of them in my name. And I was paying for every single one. I'd been covering those bills for years because, as they always said, it's just easier that way. That night, I sat down at my laptop and started making calls, canceling accounts one by one. It was almost therapeutic. Netflix gone, Hulu gone, Costco membership revoked, even the family cell plan. I ported my own number out and left them to deal with the rest. By the time I was done, I felt lighter. 3 days later, I found out just how much they noticed. I was making coffee one morning when I heard shouting outside. At first, I thought my neighbors were fighting. Then I recognized the voice. My mom was standing on my front lawn in her pajamas, hair sticking out in every direction, yelling my name like the whole neighborhood needed to know how utterly furious she was. I didn't even open the door. I just stood there by the window, coffee mug in hand, watching her stomp around in the frost. And that's when I knew this was just the beginning. The morning after Mom's lawn performance, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. 57 missed calls. 17 new voicemails. A family group chat that suddenly remembered I existed. Every single message was some variation of, "How could you do this?" Or "Do you know how much trouble you've caused?" My brother even chimed in with a gem that read, "Grow up, Henry. You're ruining things for everyone." I stared at the screen for a long time before turning it face down and walking away. I didn't know them an explanation, but that didn't stop the guilt from creeping in like a draft through a cracked window. Part of me wanted to text back to say, "Do you know what it felt like sitting in that empty house?" But I didn't. I was tired of explaining myself. That night, I got a knock on the door. It was Dad. He didn't even wait for me to invite him in. Just walked past me like it was still his house. He sat down at my kitchen table, glanced at the takeout box I was eating from, and made a face like I'd just committed a crime against food. "Your mother is beside herself," he started, as if I'd set the house on fire. "You've embarrassed this family. You know your brother's wedding is important." I didn't say anything. I just chewed my food slowly, because I knew if I opened my mouth too soon, I'd explode. He kept going. "It's not just about you. Your nieces were trying to watch their cartoons, and suddenly the account didn't work. Do you know how humiliating that is?" They were crying. I almost laughed. They were crying over Netflix. "Don't be sarcastic, Henry." His tone snapped like a whip. "You're punishing everyone over a misunderstanding." I finally put my fork down. "A misunderstanding? Dad, you all ghosted me on Christmas. Do you know what that felt like? I sat in this house alone while you were over at Mark's drinking eggnog and singing carols. Not a single text, not a single call. And you want me to spend $3,000 so I can sit at his wedding like nothing happened?" He sighed, rubbing his temples like I was the unreasonable one. "You're making too big a deal out of this. Your brother has a lot going on. We didn't think it would matter where we spent Christmas. You're an adult. You'll be fine." There it was. The line I'd heard my entire life. Whenever my feelings got trampled, "You'll be fine." Translation, what you feel doesn't matter. Dad stayed another hour, alternating between guilt tripping me, "Your mother cried all night," and offering fake solutions. "Maybe we can knock a little off the wedding cost if you apologize." I just sat there nodding when appropriate, not giving him anything. When he finally left, I felt drained. I stood in the doorway watching him get into his car, and I swear he looked disappointed, not in himself, but in me, like I'd failed some unspoken family obligation. Over the next week, the pressure campaign intensified. Mom started calling my work phone when I didn't answer my own. My aunt left me a voicemail that started with, "Sweetie, I love you," but which is never a good sign. And then came the text from my brother. "You always do this," he wrote. "You make everything about you. It's not that hard to be supportive. We're only getting married once." I typed out several drafts before deleting them. I wanted to say, "You only get married once, but I only get one family. And you all made it clear where I rank on your priority list." But I knew it wouldn't matter. He'd just tell Mom I was being dramatic, and she'd add it to her arsenal of Henry is difficult anecdotes. Then came the cherry on top. My parents actually showed up together this time, unannounced, and brought my brother with them. I was sitting on the couch watching TV when I heard knocking so loud it shook the door frame. I opened it to find all three of them standing there, looking like they were about to stage an intervention. "Henry, we need to talk," Mom said, stepping inside before I could even respond. They didn't sit this time. They stood there in my living room like a firing squad. "You've embarrassed us," Mom said flatly. "Your brother's fiancé's parents are asking why you're refusing to contribute. Do you know how that makes us look?" I just stared at her. "Do you know how it made me feel to be left out of Christmas?" Mom waved a hand like she was swatting away a fly. "We already told you that wasn't personal. We were closer to Mark's place that day, and it was easier with the kids." "It wasn't easier for me," I shot back. "I spent hours cooking for nothing. You could have told me. You could have done anything except ignore me." My brother groaned like I was being ridiculous. "This is exactly what I mean, Henry. You always make things about your feelings. This is bigger than you. This is about family. You don't just pull the plug on everything because your ego got bruised." My chest tightened. Ego. That was the word they always threw at me when I dared to ask for basic respect. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. I just said, "Get out." Mom's eyes widened like I'd slapped her. "Excuse me." "You heard me," I said calmly. "Get out of my house." They stood there for a second, stunned, before Mom hissed, "You're going to regret this." When they finally left, I locked the door and sat on the couch, shaking. My hands were trembling, not because I was scared, but because I was furious. That night, I got an email from the wedding planner. Someone had given her my address. It was an invoice for my share of the wedding costs, marked past due in bright red letters. I stared at it for a long time before closing the laptop and walking away. My family had officially crossed the line from passive-aggressive to just plain aggressive. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was done. But that was only the start of things, because the next thing they did took everything to a whole new level. A few days after that confrontation in my living room, I thought maybe things would settle down. The call stopped. The text slowed. For a brief moment, I let myself believe that maybe they'd finally gotten the message and decided to leave me alone. But quiet in my family never means peace. Quiet means plotting. It was a Thursday evening when I got the email from my bank. The subject line made my stomach drop. Suspicious activity alert. I clicked it open and froze. There had been multiple attempts to log into my online banking account, all from devices that weren't mine. I changed my password, set up extra security, and tried to shake off the paranoia that crept in. The next morning, I found out why I had been right to be paranoid. I woke up to a flurry of notifications. My checking account was nearly empty. At first, I thought it had to be some kind of mistake. I called the bank, heart racing. And after what felt like an eternity on hold, a representative confirmed what I already feared. The withdrawals were authorized. How? I asked, pacing the kitchen, my voice a strangled whisper. Sir, it looks like someone used a check linked to your account. The signature matches the one we have on file. The rep explained gently, as though that would make me feel better. I felt dizzy. I hadn't written a check in months. Then it hit me. There was only one person who had ever had access to my old checkbook. My parents. Years ago, when I first got the account, Mom had insisted she hold on to a few checks for emergencies. I hadn't thought about it since. I asked the bank to send me copies of the cashed checks. When they arrived later that afternoon, my hands shook as I opened the envelope. There it was, in black ink, my own name on the signature line, forged in a handwriting that looked enough like mine to pass at a glance. The checks were made out to my brother, one for $1,500, another for $2,000. The memo line on the second one said simply, Wedding Fund. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the papers until my vision blurred. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. Your contribution has been taken care of, it read. No need to worry about the wedding anymore. You're welcome. I swear my hands went cold. My heart wasn't even pounding. It was like it stopped altogether. I stared at that message for a long time, my mind spinning. They hadn't just taken my money. They'd taken my choice. I called Mom immediately. She answered on the second ring, her tone light and breezy like nothing had happened. Hi, sweetheart. Are you calling to say thank you? Mom, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice level. Did you cash my checks? There was a pause just long enough for me to know the answer. You weren't going to do the right thing, she said finally. We couldn't let you embarrass us like that. It's your brother's wedding, Henry. This is what family does. No, I said, my voice shaking now. Family asks. Family doesn't steal. Don't be so dramatic, she snapped. You're acting like we robbed you. You have plenty of money, Henry. You'll make more. Your brother only gets married once. Something in me snapped. You forged my signature. You always overreact, she said with a sigh like she was scolding a child. We did what we had to do. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. The rest of that day was a blur. I couldn't focus on work. I couldn't eat. Every time I looked at those checks, my chest tightened. It wasn't about the money. It was about the absolute violation of trust. That evening, as if to twist the knife deeper, my brother posted on social media about the generous contribution from my amazing family and tagged me in the post. The caption read, Wouldn't have been possible without you, bro, with a little heart emoji. I saw red. My phone rang again. This time it was Dad. Henry, you need to stop making a fuss. The money's gone. It's done. Don't ruin this for everyone else. Ruin this, I said, laughing bitterly. You already ruined it. You broke into my account, forged my name, and now you're acting like I'm the problem. Dad's tone hardened. You're not the victim here. Your brother is under a lot of stress. We had to step in. One day, you'll thank us for keeping this family together. I hung up again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking about every time in my life they'd dismissed me. Every time they'd chosen my brother's needs over mine. The birthday they forgot because of his soccer tournament. The time I got into a car accident and they left me at the hospital to go to his college game. The years I paid for the family cell plan because you make more money. It's only fair. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. This was a pattern. And as I lay there, something shifted inside me. I felt the anger settle into something colder, sharper, a decision. The next morning, I went to the bank and started the process of filing a fraud report. The teller looked sympathetic as she explained it might take some time to investigate. I didn't care. I wasn't going to let this go quietly. When I got home, I found another message waiting for me. This time from my mom, furious now. "How dare you involve the bank," she wrote. "Do you know what you're doing to your brother? You're going to ruin his credit before the wedding." I didn't reply, but in that moment, as I sat there in my quiet kitchen, I knew something with absolute clarity. This was war now, and I wasn't going to be the one who blinked first. The days following the fraud report were some of the longest of my life. If the confrontation had been the moment something inside me snapped, this was the quiet, aching aftermath. The part where you sit in the wreckage and realize just how alone you are. The calls didn't stop, but the tone shifted. Where before there had been guilt tripping and pleading, now there was anger. My voicemail was full of relatives telling me I'd gone too far. My aunt left a long message saying I'd publicly humiliated the family by dragging the bank into this. My cousin, who I hadn't spoken to in months, texted me to say, "Bro, you're making this worse than it has to be. Just drop it and move on." Even my grandmother, who had always been the one person in my corner, called me one evening and sighed into the phone. "Henry, sweetheart," she said gently, "I know you're upset, but this is going to tear the family apart. Is it really worth it?" I didn't know how to answer her. Was it worth it? I didn't feel like I was the one tearing the family apart. They had done that the moment they chose to betray me. But I also knew she couldn't see it that way. To her, I was the one making noise, the one forcing everyone to pick a side. I found myself withdrawing. I stopped answering the phone. I stayed late at work just so I wouldn't have to come home to an empty house that smelled faintly of rosemary and lemon from that wasted Christmas dinner. The sight of my dining table still made my stomach twist. The half-burnt candle in the middle of it mocked me every time I passed by. One night, I came home to find an envelope taped to my front door. It was from my parents. Inside was a letter handwritten in my mom's looping script that managed to be both apologetic and condescending at the same time. "Henry," it began, "we love you, but this behavior is hurting everyone. You need to grow up and stop making such a spectacle. Your brother is under tremendous stress right now, and you are adding to it. Think of the children. They don't understand why they can't watch their shows or why everyone is upset with Uncle Henry. Please, for the sake of the family, drop this. We can talk about Christmas later. Love, Mom." I read the letter 3 times, each time feeling my jaw tighten a little more. The way she wrote, "We can talk about Christmas later," as if it were some minor scheduling conflict and not the very thing that had started this entire chain reaction, nearly made me rip the letter in half. Instead, I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. I wasn't sure why I kept it. Maybe because I knew I'd need the reminder later. The worst part was how quiet the house had gotten. Before all this, I used to love my little routines. Cooking dinner, watching a show, texting a friend. Now everything felt heavy. Even music sounded wrong. I'd put on a playlist and then turn it off halfway through because it felt like noise. At work, my coworkers started asking if I was okay. I brushed them off, saying I was just tired, but the truth was I wasn't sleeping. I'd lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, replaying every word my parents had said in my living room. Every time they'd made me feel small over the years. It wasn't just this incident. It was years of being the dependable one, the one who could handle it, the one who always gave more than he got back. And somewhere in those sleepless nights, the anger started to harden into something else, something colder. One Friday, I took a half day from work and went to the bank in person. I sat with a manager and went over every account I had, making sure there were no other checks floating out there, no hidden links my family could exploit. I moved my savings into a new account they didn't know existed and set up extra verification on everything I could. The manager, a kind older man with glasses, looked at me over the desk and said quietly, "I've seen this before. Family disputes can get ugly. You're doing the right thing protecting yourself." That was the first time someone outside the situation had validated what I was feeling, and it hit me harder than I expected. I left the bank feeling like I could breathe for the first time in days. Over the weekend, I started making a list. At first, it was just practical things, what accounts were still in my name, what bills I was paying that benefited my family. But as I kept writing, the list turned into something more. I wrote down every slight, every moment where I'd been overlooked, every time my parents had chosen my brother's needs over mine. By Sunday night, I had pages of notes. Looking at them all together was like staring at a map of my entire life. A map that showed exactly how many times I'd been pushed to the side, expected to sacrifice, told I was fine when I wasn't. I didn't know what I was going to do with that list yet, but just writing it made me feel less powerless. Monday morning, I woke up before my alarm and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. Not happy, not exactly, but steady. That was the day I stopped hoping for an apology. And that was the day I quietly started to plan. It wasn't revenge yet, not exactly. At first, it was just practical, protective measures. I met with HR at work to update my emergency contacts. I changed the locks on my house. I updated my will, something I'd been putting off for years. But underneath those practical steps, something sharper was forming. Because as much as I was protecting myself, a part of me was starting to imagine what it would feel like to turn the tables. To stop being the person they could depend on. To make them feel what it was like to be left out, left behind, left in the dark. I wasn't ready to act on it yet. But the thought was there now, and it wasn't going away. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get any lower, I got an invitation in the mail. A formal, embossed wedding invitation with my name on it. Under guest contribution, it listed the $3,000 they had taken from me, marked as paid. And just below that, in neat cursive, my brother had written a personal note. Glad you came through for the family. See you there. I put the invitation down on the counter and walked out of the room. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat in silence, letting the anger settle deeper until it felt like stone, because now I knew exactly what needed to be done. In the weeks after that wedding invitation, something in me shifted. I stopped reacting to every message, every phone call, every guilt trip. It wasn't that I forgave them, far from it, but I decided I wouldn't let their chaos control my day anymore. For the first time in my life, I started living like they didn't exist. It was almost unnerving how quickly. Things started to feel lighter once I made that decision. I threw myself into work, taking on projects I'd been too distracted to commit to before. My boss noticed. 2 weeks later, I was called into his office and offered a promotion, a real one, not just a title change. It came with a raise big enough that the money they had stolen from me now looked like a rounding error. I went home that night, poured myself a drink, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the offer letter. I thought about how my dad had called me selfish for not funding the wedding, how my mom had said I was making a spectacle, and then I thought about this. Me, sitting in my own house, with my own career, earning my own success that no one could take away. It was the first time in a long time that I felt proud of myself. With the raise came new possibilities. I paid off the last of my student loans and then started putting money into a separate account, a private one that no one in my family knew about. Every paycheck, a chunk went in there. Not for them, not for emergencies, not for some hypothetical future Christmas dinner. Just for me. I started taking better care of myself, too. It was almost embarrassing how quickly I realized I'd been neglecting my own needs. I signed up for a gym membership, one with a rock climbing wall, which I'd always wanted to try but never had the time for. I found a trainer who didn't make me feel judged for being out of shape. After a few weeks, I started sleeping better. Friends I hadn't seen in months started inviting me out again, and this time I said yes. I went to trivia nights, weekend hikes, even a pottery class that a coworker convinced me to try. For the first time in years, my calendar was filled with things I actually looked forward to. I didn't post any of this online. I didn't brag about it to anyone. But quietly, my life was getting bigger, and theirs was shrinking, at least where I was concerned. One day at work, we had a team lunch to celebrate closing a big deal. I was laughing with my coworkers when I saw my mom's name flash across my phone screen. Normally, that would have ruined my entire mood, but this time, I just let it ring. When the voicemail came through, I didn't even listen to it right away. Later, I played it back while cooking dinner. Mom's voice was tight, almost desperate. "Henry, this has gone on long enough. You can't just ignore us forever. Your brother's fiance's parents are asking questions. People are starting to wonder what's wrong with you." I smiled to myself, stirring the pan. For once, the shame she was trying to dump on me didn't stick. By spring, the fraud investigation had made progress. The bank sent me a letter saying they had confirmed the checks were indeed unauthorized. There would be a formal report filed, and while it would take time to recover the funds, The process was moving in my favor. That letter felt like more than just a financial win. It felt like someone, somewhere, had finally said, "Yes, Henry, what happened to you was wrong." It gave me the push I didn't know I needed. I hired a financial advisor. Together, we went through every account, every asset, every piece of paperwork tied to my name. Anything my parents had access to, even passively, I moved or closed. I opened a P.O. box, so they couldn't just drop letters at my door anymore. When I was done, I realized something. For the first time in my adult life, there was nothing they could use to reach me unless I wanted to be reached. That was power. And it wasn't just financial power. I noticed it in the way I carried myself at work, too. I spoke up more in meetings, started mentoring junior employees, even volunteered to lead a new initiative that no one else wanted to touch. By summer, I was the one people went to for answers. My boss asked me to represent the company at a conference out of state. All expenses paid. The day I flew out, I got a text from my brother saying, "Hope you're ready for the wedding speech." I stared at it for a long time before turning off my phone and boarding the plane. The conference was one of the best weeks of my life. I met people from all over the industry, made connections, and came home with opportunities that were bigger than anything I'd imagined for myself a year ago. Meanwhile, I heard through a cousin that my family was getting more and more frustrated. Apparently, they'd been telling everyone that Henry is being difficult and Henry is acting out. But the less I engaged, the less power those words seemed to have. People started to notice that my version of events made more sense. A few even reached out privately to say they supported me, though they couldn't get involved. It didn't matter. I wasn't looking for allies anymore. I wasn't looking for apologies. I was building something much more valuable: independence. One night, sitting on my back porch with a glass of whiskey, I thought about that Christmas turkey, cold and untouched in my kitchen months ago. I thought about the forged checks, the letter taped to my door, the look on my mother's face when I told them to leave my house. And for the first time, the thought of revenge didn't just feel satisfying. It felt inevitable. I didn't know exactly what shape it would take yet, but I knew this much. I wasn't going to just walk back into their lives like nothing had happened. When I made my move, it was going to be deliberate, calm, and impossible to ignore. And as the wedding date drew closer, I could feel the plan forming piece by piece. By the time summer was fading into fall, I had reached a point where I wasn't just surviving without my family. I was thriving. The wedding was now only a few months away. But for once, I wasn't dreading the date. If anything, I felt a strange anticipation. I knew I wasn't going to just show up, smile for the pictures, and pretend everything was fine. But if I was going to make a statement, I needed information. And that's when I got it, accidentally. One Thursday, I ran into my cousin Laura at the grocery store. She looked surprised to see me, which made sense. Most of my family had been acting like I'd gone into hiding. After some small talk, she leaned in and whispered, "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but your brother's wedding is a financial mess." That caught my attention immediately. Apparently, the $3,000 per guest fee wasn't just about covering the fancy venue. My brother and his fiancée had booked an over-the-top destination wedding at a vineyard and had overextended themselves so badly that they were barely making the payment schedule. They were counting on every guest contributing, not just me, but everyone, to make the numbers work. If people backed out, they could lose the deposit. Laura said they already had to cut the open bar for the rehearsal dinner because they were over budget. I thanked her and left with my groceries, but my mind was racing. This wasn't just about them wanting me to do the right thing. They needed me. Without my contribution, they'd be underwater. And now that I had filed the fraud report, they were stuck using money they'd taken illegally. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I had leverage. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and started writing. This wasn't like the list I made back when I was angry and hurting. This was surgical. I wrote down everything I knew: the timeline of the wedding payments, what my cousin had told me about the budget, every voicemail and text where my parents or brother had pressured me to pay. I had a paper trail now, enough to show anyone who asked that I wasn't just being difficult. I was responding to outright theft. Then I started thinking about my appearance at the wedding. If I went at all, I wasn't going to just quietly sit in the corner. If I declined, I wasn't going to just say I was busy. Whatever I chose, it was going to make a point. Over the next few weeks, opportunities kept falling into my lap. The fraud investigation wrapped up officially in my favor. The bank reimbursed me for the stolen money, and flagged my parents' access for fraud. They would now have a very hard time opening any joint accounts or using my information for anything. Around the same time, work gave me a significant end-of-year bonus for the project I'd led over the summer. Between the promotion, the bonus, and the money reimbursed by the bank, I was now in the best financial position I'd ever been. I even upgraded my car, not to flaunt, but to remind myself that I had built this life for me, with no one's help. But perhaps the biggest turning point came when I met with a lawyer. At first, I just wanted to make sure there was nothing more my parents could access financially. But the conversation quickly turned strategic. "This is more than just a family spat," my lawyer said, flipping through the documents I brought. "They forged checks, they coerced you, and now they're harassing you. If they try anything else, we can take action legally and financially." Hearing a professional confirm what I already knew, that this wasn't just drama, this was wrongdoing, felt like flipping a switch. I left that office with a plan forming so clearly in my head I could almost see it. Meanwhile, the wedding group chat, yes, they had one. Yes, they added me to it without asking, was full of updates. They were still talking about finalizing contributions and making sure everyone was on the same page. Each message was a reminder of just how transactional this whole thing had become. One day, the wedding planner accidentally replied all to an email thread I was CC'd on, attaching the full spreadsheet of guests, payment statuses, and notes. I don't think she meant for me to see it, but I read every line. There it was in black and white, my name with a note next to it that said, "Paid via Henry's parents." Under the comments column, it said, "Needs attitude adjusted before wedding day." I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. That was it. That was the moment I stopped just planning and started preparing, because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about respect, or rather, the complete lack of it. They saw me as a problem to be managed, a box to be checked, a wallet with legs. And now, thanks to their own carelessness, I had everything I needed to flip the script. I printed the email and put it with the rest of my documents. Then I called the lawyer back. "I think I know exactly what I want to do," I told her. The next few weeks were strangely calm. Outwardly, I went about my life, work, gym, dinners with friends. But behind the scenes, I was moving pieces into place, securing my finances, drafting a letter, making sure that when I finally made my move, it would land like a thunderclap. Every time I passed my fridge and saw that wedding invitations still stuck to it with a magnet, I smiled just a little. Not out of joy, but out of certainty. I wasn't just going to protect myself anymore. I was going to make sure they never forgot the day they decided to cross me. The wedding date was circled on my calendar, not as an event to look forward to, but as a deadline. Everything I did in the weeks leading up to it was deliberate. Every step felt like sharpening a blade. Slow, methodical, precise. I started by finalizing my finances. My lawyer helped me draft a formal letter to my parents and brother, stating in clear legal language that the money they had taken had been flagged as fraud, reimbursed by the bank, and that any further attempts to access my accounts or represent my contribution as voluntary would be considered financial harassment. It was professional, calm, and just intimidating enough to get their attention. I sent it by certified mail. 3 days later, I got the read receipt, and then silence. Not even a phone call. That silence was almost sweeter than an apology. But I wasn't done. Next, I prepared a folder, a neat, organized packet with copies of the forged checks, the bank's reimbursement letter, the email thread from the wedding planner, and a brief summary of events from Christmas onward. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was just facts, clean and undeniable. And then I waited. The wedding week arrived. People from my extended family were flying into town, and I knew from social media that my parents were running themselves ragged getting everything ready. My brother posted daily updates about the most important weekend of our lives. The night before the wedding, I got a final text from my mom. "Henry, we expect you to behave tomorrow. This is Mark's day. Please don't cause a scene." I smiled at that, because she had no idea that the scene had already been set, and not by me. I had RSVP'd yes months ago, but I hadn't told anyone how I planned to attend. On the morning of the wedding, I put on the sharpest suit I owned. Not a rented tux, not something bland. A tailored charcoal suit, perfectly pressed, the kind of outfit that says, "I am not here by accident." When I arrived at the vineyard venue, I was greeted by the wedding planner, who looked startled to see me. I handed her an envelope, my packet of documents, and said calmly, "Make sure this gets to the bride's parents before the ceremony starts." She hesitated, then took it. Inside that packet was everything. Proof that their generous contributions narrative was built on stolen money. A polite but firm statement that I would not be funding any further expenses, and a request that my name be removed from any mention of contributors in their speeches or materials. By the time I took my seat, I could feel the ripple effect starting. The bride's parents were sitting 2 rows up, whispering furiously, passing the folder back and forth. My brother glanced back at me once, frowning, as if he could feel that something had shifted but couldn't place what. I sat there calmly, hands folded, smiling slightly. The ceremony went on as planned for a while. But after the vows, when the officiant invited the parents to give a few words, there was a pause, a long, uncomfortable pause. My mother stood, walked up to the microphone, and then just said, "Congratulations," before sitting back down, tight-lipped and pale. It was subtle, but I could see it. The tension, the whispered conversations, the sideways looks. By the time we moved to the reception, the gossip had already started. I didn't confront anyone directly. I didn't raise my voice. I simply made sure that the truth was undeniable and let it do the work for me. Over dinner, I caught bits of conversation from nearby tables. "Did you hear about the checks?" Apparently, Henry didn't actually agree to pay. "Wait, they forged. No wonder he's mad." By the time the first dance was over, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. The fairy tale image my parents had worked so hard to maintain had cracks running through it, and everyone could see them. When my brother finally cornered me near the bar, his face was red. "What did you do?" he hissed. I took a sip of my drink, met his eyes, and said calmly, "I told the truth." "You couldn't just let it go," he said, his voice rising. "I did let it go," I replied evenly. "I let go of paying for things I didn't agree to. I let go of being the family doormat." I paused, letting my words sink in. "You should be thanking me. You got your wedding. You got your money. All I did was make sure people knew how you got it." His jaw worked like he wanted to yell, but with guests watching, he just glared and stalked off. I stayed just long enough to finish my drink, then slipped out quietly before the cake cutting. The next morning, my phone lit up with messages from cousins and old family friends. Most were short, "Good for you," or "I had no idea." But a few were longer, saying things like, "We always wondered why you were treated differently." For the first time in months, I felt like I had exhaled completely. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic, but it was clean. And it was only the beginning, because the wedding may have been over, but the fallout was just starting. And I had one final move left to make. The morning after the wedding, I woke up late, made myself coffee, and sat out on my porch while my phone buzzed like a wasp nest. My family's group chat was a full-on firestorm. Messages flying back and forth, people demanding explanations, others defending me, some saying they'd had no idea what had been going on. I scrolled for a while, half amused, half detached. For once, I wasn't anxious about what I might find in those messages. I knew exactly where I stood. Around noon, my parents showed up at my house. I saw them through the window as they walked up the driveway. Mom looking tight-lipped and pale, Dad with his jaw set like he was about to deliver a lecture. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. "Henry, we need to talk," Dad said, his voice low but tense. "Then talk," I said, leaning against the door frame. Mom stepped forward. "You humiliated us yesterday. Do you have any idea what you've done?" The bride's parents were furious. People were whispering all night. "You ruined Mark's wedding." I shook my head slowly. "No, I didn't ruin anything. You ruined it the moment you decided to take money from me without asking. All I did was tell the truth." Dad's face went red. "You could have handled this privately." "I tried to," I said evenly. "You ignored me. You dismissed me. You treated me like I was just a wallet with legs. So, I handled it myself." Mom's eyes narrowed. "You've embarrassed this family. People are saying things." "Good," I said, cutting her off. "Let them talk. Maybe they'll think twice before they do to someone else what you did to me." For a long moment, we just stood there staring at each other. Then Mom's voice softened, almost pleading. "Henry, we're family. Can't we just move on from this?" I laughed softly, not out of humor, but disbelief. "Move on? You forged my name, emptied my account, and then tried to make me feel guilty for being upset. You didn't just cross a line, Mom. You burned the bridge. I can't just move on from that." Dad exhaled, shaking his head. "So what now? You're just going to cut us off? Pretend we don't exist. I didn't answer right away. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, then said, I'm done letting you treat me like an afterthought. I'm done paying for the privilege of being ignored. From now on, I'm living my life without you. If you want to be in it, you can start by apologizing sincerely. Not sorry you feel that way. Sorry for what you did. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. Neither of them said a word. Until then, I added quietly, don't come to my house uninvited again. I closed the door gently, not slamming it, not yelling, just shutting it with finality. For the rest of that day, I felt a strange calm. It wasn't happiness exactly, but it was clarity. I went for a long drive that afternoon, windows down, music playing, and realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for their approval. In the weeks that followed, the fallout spread. Word got around about what had really happened with the checks. Some relatives were shocked. Others weren't surprised at all. A few even reached out to me privately to say, good for you for standing up for yourself. Meanwhile, my brother's wedding bills kept piling up. Without my parents being able to lean on me financially, they had to cut back on their post-wedding honeymoon plans and sell a few big-ticket items they bought on credit. My cousin Laura later told me that the bride's parents were furious about being kept in the dark and had demanded that my parents cover some of the overages themselves. My parents tried calling a few more times, but I let it go to voicemail. Eventually, the calls stopped. One Saturday, I took down the wedding invitation from my fridge, slipped it into the folder with the rest of my documents, and put it away in my filing cabinet. Not as a keepsake, but as a reminder of what I'd survived. That evening, I invited a few friends over for dinner. We sat around my table, eating, laughing, talking late into the night. For the first time since that lonely Christmas, the house felt full again. Full in a way that had nothing to do with blood relatives and everything to do with people who actually cared about me. As I cleared the table and turned off the lights, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked different, lighter. I realized then that I hadn't just taken revenge. I had taken back my life. And it felt better than I'd ever imagined. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more crazy Reddit tales, and ring the bell so you never miss the next one. And hey, share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you would have done in this situation.